The following are 10 astonishing yet documented episodes from Robert Mitchum's life. In 1948, cameras caught him being hauled from a Laurel Canyon home with marijuana in his pocket as flashbulbs burst. Hollywood considered that the end of his career. Nearly every studio assumed he would vanish, yet the very next picture he appeared in became the year's top hit. What the public never realized was something else. The man labeled lazy, careless, and detached had already published poetry at 9. At 15, he fled a Georgia chain gang while bullets chased him. By 22, he was composing music for Orson Welles. He rejected both Patton and Dirty Harry on moral grounds, and he remained married to the same woman for 57 years. He joked to reporters that he only had two ways to act, with a horse and without one. Filmmakers who worked beside him called him the greatest actor alive. He once remarked that when he died, the drawer would hold only a note reading "later." What follows are 10 documented chapters from Robert Mitchum's life. We begin. First story. His father was killed between two rail cars. On February 20, 1919, James Thomas Mitchum worked as a switchman at the Charleston Navy Yard in South Carolina. While coupling freight cars, he slipped and was crushed between them. He passed away an hour later at the Navy Yard Hospital. The Charleston Evening Post printed the report that same day. Robert Mitchum was just 18 months old at the time. His mother, Anne Harriet Gunderson, was pregnant with their third child. She struggled to find work as a linotype operator at the Bridgeport Post in Connecticut. Her children were moved among relatives in Connecticut, Delaware, and New York. In 1927, she married again, a British journalist named Hugh Cunningham Morris. But the loss had already shaped him. Growing up without a father, Robert became what principals feared: intelligent, aggressive, and uncontrollable. For fighting a principal, he was expelled from schools in Delaware. Later, Manhattan's Heron High School in Hell's Kitchen removed him for constant defiance. The irony was striking. His father had died like many freight train hobos, crushed by rail cars. Within a dozen years, the teenage son would be riding those same trains across Depression-era America. Second story. His mother prepared his suitcase and sent him into the Depression. Legend claims Mitchum simply ran away. Lee Server's documented biography, Robert Mitchum, Baby I Don't Care, tells a sadder version. She packed his bag and handed him a sandwich for the trip. He was 14. It was 1931 and school had nothing more for him. The years that followed were true American wandering. He traveled on flatbeds, freight wagons, and refrigerated trains nationwide. Veteran hobos taught him to steal food, beg, and evade railroad police. He dug ditches, harvested fruit, washed dishes, and worked in a Pennsylvania coal mine until claustrophobia nearly broke him. He also boxed professionally. 27 fights left a broken nose and a scarred left eye. The famous heavy-lidded gaze audiences later read as indifference was really the face of a teenager punched for pay. In a 1962 interview with the Saturday Evening Post, he recalled learning about police and jail cells early. When cold or starving, he would check himself into a station for a night's shelter. These were not adventures, they were survival before his 16th birthday. Third story. He fled a Georgia chain gang while shots were fired. During the summer of 1933, 15-year-old Mitchum stepped off a freight train in Savannah, Georgia. Police arrested him for vagrancy, labeled him suspicious, and beat him with a nightstick. He received a 180-day sentence on the Chatham County chain gang. The camp stood in Pipe Maker Swamp, full of mosquitoes and disease. Prisoners labored 12 hours a day, every day, and received one meal daily. Guards clamped iron so tightly into his legs that infection spread from heel to knee. Mitchum later described the misery. Each week meant barely enough food and a few cents worth of tobacco. Around him, men died from tuberculosis, gangrene, and swamp fever. His escape came during roadside work when the guards removed the shackles. He moved away, waited for distraction, and ran toward a tree line while bullets followed him. He hitchhiked back to Delaware, where his family had relocated. The infection nearly cost his leg, leaving him on crutches for weeks. Here is the startling detail. When he returned to Savannah in 1961 to film Cape Fear, he was technically still an escaped prisoner. Director J. Lee Thompson noticed Mitchum carried visible resentment throughout production because of childhood memories there. The anger seen in his performance as Max Cady was not entirely acting, some of it came from memory. Fourth story. The scandal that should have ended everything. On August 31, 1948, LAPD narcotics officers raided a cottage at 8443 Ridpath Drive in Laurel Canyon, earning $3,000 a week at RKO, smoking marijuana with 20-year-old actress Leila Leeds and two others.
The arrest itself was a staged operation. Authorities had watched Mitchum for 8 months and secretly bugged the house for 5. The person who invited him to the cottage was later exposed as the informant and was never prosecuted. Reporters had already been alerted, and journalists crowded the station before Mitchum even arrived. Later, Mitchum questioned why newspapers were notified in advance that a famous actor would be arrested on marijuana charges. When booking officers asked his job, he answered, "former actor." A conviction followed with a 60-day sentence. Only a week was spent in county jail and 43 days at the Sheriff's Honor Farm in Castaic, California. His famous remark compared prison to Palm Springs, just without the wealthy crowd. What should have ruined his career instead revived it. RKO chief Howard Hughes quickly released the shelved film Rachel and the Stranger as an experiment. It became the studio's biggest hit of 1948. Viewers actually cheered when Mitchum appeared. Meanwhile, Leila Leeds received the same charge and sentence. Her career collapsed completely. No major film roles came again. She was eventually pushed out of California and died in obscurity in 1999. Identical crime, identical arrest, but gender and studio influence decided the outcome. Investigations later proved the arrest had been staged, and on January 31, 1951, the conviction was overturned. Mitchum never promoted the reversal. Number 5. The masterpiece nobody wanted. Director Charles Laughton cast Mitchum in The Night of the Hunter in 1955. The story followed a murderous preacher hunting 2 children for hidden money. Mitchum portrayed Reverend Harry Powell, with love and hate tattooed across his knuckles. Today, the Sight and Sound 2022 poll ranks it among the 25 greatest films ever made. Upon release, however, it failed badly. With a budget near $795,000, domestic rentals reached only about $300,000. Critics rejected it, and audiences stayed away. The disappointment was so crushing that Laughton never directed again. He had bought rights to Norman Mailer's The Naked and the Dead for a second film, but abandoned the plan. In 1962, he died without returning to directing. Yet this contradicts Mitchum's careless public image. Over the years, he repeatedly called it his finest performance and Laughton his best director. Because Laughton disliked working with children, Mitchum quietly guided young actors Billy Chapin and Sally Jane Bruce himself. The supposedly indifferent star effectively directed much of the film to protect it. Laughton offered perhaps the clearest description of him. He called Mitchum one of the world's finest actors and said he could be the greatest living Macbeth. The tough attitude, he said, was only a disguise, hiding a literate and gracious man with excellent manners. The famous knuckle tattoos later became one of cinema's most recognizable images, echoed in Do the Right Thing and many other works. A film once rejected is now considered a landmark of American cinema. Number 6. The Secret Poet. This revelation most challenges his public persona. The man who claimed indifference had published poetry at 9. Writing began at 7. By 9, he appeared in a newspaper interview and photograph. He later said the attention created deep introspection that conflicted with his urge to express himself. The creativity continued throughout his life. Children's plays he wrote were staged by the Players Guild of Long Beach. He also created lyrics for his sister Julie's nightclub shows. In 1939, at 22, he composed an oratorio produced by Orson Welles at the Hollywood Bowl for Jewish refugees. Despite leaving school early, he worked with the era's greatest theatrical mind. A photographic memory inherited from his mother allowed instant memorization of dialogue. Rehearsals were rarely necessary. Scripts were marked with an N, meaning no action required, because a look could replace words. As a teenager in Hell's Kitchen, he read Shakespeare, Wordsworth, and Conrad. Shirley MacLaine later told Variety he was not the swaggering tough man people imagined, but a brilliant thinker. Frank Sinatra said Mitchum understood music from Bach to Brubeck better than anyone he knew. Mitchum jokingly replied that Sinatra's comment revealed Sinatra's own musical knowledge. The actor who dismissed acting as merely faces and lines had been writing poetry and composing music long before acting.
Number 7. The bar fight with a ranked boxer. During filming of 1 Minute to Zero in Colorado Springs on November 7, 1951, the incident occurred. At the Red Fox Lounge in the Alamo Hotel, a soldier named Private Bernard Reynolds started trouble with a lieutenant colonel. Mitchum intervened by grabbing his collar. Reynolds threw a punch. Mitchum dodged, slammed his head onto a table, and kicked him in the face. Headlines spread nationwide after Reynolds was revealed as a world-ranked heavyweight boxer with 19 knockouts. In Lee Server's biography, Mitchum described it bluntly: "Fights are not polite when you provoke a beast." Publicly, he was calmer, saying actors often attract aggressive men who think movie stars are weak. He added he never begins fights, but can end them. This was no empty boasting. 27 professional boxing matches, years in hobo camps and chain gangs, and constant street fights in Hell's Kitchen hardened him into real danger inside a 6'1", 185-pound body. In another incident, he once knocked out 3 U.S. sailors in a Tobago bar. On the Blood Alley set in 1955, he was accused of tossing a crewman into San Francisco Bay, something he denied, yet it still got him fired and replaced by John Wayne. The Sweet Science, a respected boxing publication, concluded Bob Mitchum didn't have to pretend to be tough, he genuinely was. At number 8, he rejected Patton and Dirty Harry on principle. This surprises those who think Mitchum accepted any paying role. He passed on 2 of the most legendary parts in American film history. His explanation showed a seriousness far removed from his laid-back persona. He said, "Not that I'm perfect, there are movies I won't do for any amount. I turned down Patton and Dirty Harry, films that insult the world. If I've got $5, I don't need money that way." For Patton, he even suggested George C. Scott, believing the part needed passion his own detachment might weaken. Scott eventually won the Academy Award. Regarding Dirty Harry, Mitchum disliked its vigilante message, while Clint Eastwood accepted the role and launched a franchise. He also declined The Defiant Ones in 1958, not for politics, but because his real chain gang experience made the story feel unrealistic. The man who claimed he cared about nothing rejected roles because he cared deeply about what stories implied. These decisions shattered the myth of indifference. He simply concealed how much he cared. Number 9. The hard-boiled actor who recorded a Calypso album in 1956 while filming Heaven Knows Mr. Allison in Trinidad and Tobago. Mitchum fell for Calypso music. He spent evenings in bars and street shows meeting performers like Lord Melody and Mighty Sparrow. He proposed an album to Capitol Records. In March 1957, he recorded Calypso Is Like So, a 14-track collection of Caribbean songs. It failed commercially. Later, critics called it more authentic than Harry Belafonte's famous release. His music career continued. The Ballad of Thunder Road, which he co-wrote, stayed on the Billboard Hot 100 for 21 weeks. His 1967 Nashville record produced the country hit Little Old Wine Drinker Me, reaching number 9 and later covered by Dean Martin. He even received an Academy of Country Music nomination for Most Promising Male Vocalist in 1968 at age 50. The film Thunder Road, which he wrote, produced, and starred in with his 16-year-old son James, became a drive-in classic that ran for decades and inspired the Dukes of Hazzard.
Bruce Springsteen named his famous song Thunder Road after seeing the movie poster. A calypso album, a country hit, and influence on Springsteen all came from the man who insisted he had no talent worth mentioning. Number 10. 57 Years, A Simple Note, and Ashes Scattered at Sea. Robert Mitchum met 14-year-old Dorothy Clement Spence in fall 1933 while recovering from chain gang injuries in Delaware. He was 16, on crutches and on the run, she remembered. He wasn't the flattering type like other boys, yet compared to them, he seemed far more interesting. His blunt line was, "Stick with me, kid, and you'll be farting through silk." They married March 16, 1940, in a cabbage-scented Methodist parsonage kitchen in Dover, Delaware. Their marriage lasted 57 years. It wasn't flawless. Affairs occurred, including a 3-year relationship with Shirley MacLaine in the early 1960s. Dorothy endured it. Mitchum ended the affair because, according to a biographer, he couldn't imagine life without Dorothy. Later, he admitted he'd been a poor husband, but said none of the others were worth a candle beside her. They had 3 children, James, Christopher, and Patrine. Together, they formed DRM Productions and produced films including Thunder Road.
Robert Mitchum died at 5 a.m. on July 1, 1997, at his Santa Barbara home from lung cancer and emphysema at age 79, with Dorothy beside him. His son, Chris, simply said he had a good run. Which moment surprised you most? The childhood poetry, the chain gang escape, or the 57-year marriage? Tell us in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories about remarkable lives. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like because it truly helps the channel grow. Thanks for watching.